All right. I'll get started. Our guests will join us when they arrive. Good afternoon. Thank you. Thanks. How's that? Good? All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, we'll wait until you. No, it's okay. Because we're just stalling for our friends. Oh, okay. They're still walking. All right. Well, good afternoon. We're here today because we are about to make history in the state of Michigan. The presidential primary is February 27th, and every Michigan voter has options to vote, more options than ever before in this election. They can vote at their polling place on election day. They can vote from home with an absentee ballot and return that ballot at a drop box or through the mail or at our clerk's office. And now they also have the option to vote in person at an early voting site. So this Saturday, February 17th, will be the kickoff, the start of in-person early voting in Michigan, in every part of the state. We have just come from the Michigan Department of State's annual Black History celebration, where we celebrated the life and legacy of former Secretary of State Richard Austin. Richard Austin was the nation's first African-American Secretary of State. He was Michigan's longest-serving Secretary of State, and he was a trailblazer for motor vehicle safety and for voting rights. In 1975, Secretary Austin pioneered the motor voter law here in Michigan, and I have a picture that I can show you later of him signing that law with the governor. That law allowed people to conveniently register to vote when they renewed their driver's license. It served as a model for the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, or the Motor Voter Law. And since then, millions of Americans have benefited from automatic voter registration tied to their driver's license or state ID. And today we are honored to have members of Secretary Austin's family here with us as we build on his legacy and launch early voting in Michigan. Would you like to join us? So these are Secretary Austin's niece and nephew, Laurie and Dennis Moore. And would one of you like to share a few words, Laurie?
Sure. I did write down some words. Good afternoon, and on behalf of the Richard H. Austin family, we thank you for this special Black History event. As Secretary of State, he always created new and better ways to serve the people of Michigan. And one of the things is the motor voter law, passed in 1975, nearly 18 years before the U.S. Congress adopted a similar nationwide law. Excuse me, we were running. Fast forward to 2024, it is inspiring to see Michigan embracing new options for voters, making voting more accessible and convenient. Our family and the Michigan Department of State carry his legacy of free and fair elections for every voter, no matter where they live or who they vote for. We join Secretary Benson, our great friend, in encouraging every voter to cast your ballots in this and every election. Your vote is your voice. Use your power and make civic engagement a way of life. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Laurie. Thank you both for being here. We just had a very robust celebration at our other location in Diamondale, and so we're all traveling there and appreciate you being here to honor this other historic event in our state's history, the launch of early voting. Of course, we're here because in 2022, Michiganders voted overwhelmingly in our state constitution to mandate at least 9 days of early voting in every statewide election. So this year's presidential primary is the first statewide election where every voter will have the option to cast their ballot in person at an early voting site. Early voting will operate just like anyone would experience on election day. A voter comes in, gets their ballot, marks their ballot, and enters it in to the voting tabulator. Those ballots will be counted on election day, and early voting is not new in our country, even though it may be new for some voters in Michigan. 21 other states provide this as a option to their voters. And this Saturday, Michigan will join them as a state that has election days rather than just one election day. Michigan voters demanded this new voting right in November of 2022, and our office, along with the state legislature, worked hard to develop the implementing legislation to make sure everything was in place by the constitutional deadline of this year's presidential primary. Legislative leaders worked for months with our office and clerks all across the state, like Mary Clark, who's here with me today, to ensure that clerks had the funding and flexibility that they need to implement early voting successfully in their community. That legislation that was passed last year has gone into effect, and in these last 7 short months, the Bureau of Elections has been working tirelessly to develop the new technologies and procedures for early voting. Under the law, early voting can be conducted in 3 ways: through the entire county, through a municipality, or through multiple municipalities, townships, and cities partnering and hosting sites together. Last fall, clerks in several communities held local elections and volunteered to test out early voting through a pilot program. That successful pilot in places like Grand Rapids, here in Lansing, and in Oakland County successfully allowed us to test the early voting technology, evaluate additional needs going into this year, and get voters and poll workers familiar with what they could expect from early voting. One of the clerks who participated in this early voting pilot is here with us today, Delta Township Clerk Mary Clark, and she's here to share with you some of her experiences from the early voting pilot and her hope and optimism for the early voting that is rolling out this weekend. Mary.
Thank you. As Secretary said, my name is Mary Clark, and I have been the elected clerk in Delta Township for the past nearly 13 years. Last November, Delta Township partnered with our neighbor, Windsor Township, and we're both in Eaton County, to test multi-municipal early voting at a site run at my office. We were honored to participate in the early voting pilot as it provided us with an opportunity to be part of the development exciting new voting option for Michigan residents. You can only identify potential challenges by actually executing the process and in real time, and the pilot allowed us to do just that and ultimately create a great functional process. Our experience was positive. We were able to test the new early voting tool, figure out what worked, what needed some changes, and give feedback directly to the Bureau of Elections every day in conference calls. They were totally devoted to the work that takes to make a successful project work. And those conference calls were problem-solving communication that's essential as the Bureau prepared the statewide early voting, which again starts this Saturday. Our early voting was also positive for our election workers and our voters. Absentee voters frequently, very frequently, ask for the opportunity to put their own ballot in the tabulator, and this new process affords voters this opportunity. As clerks, we appreciate the opportunity to be a voice in the development and success of early voting and other changes in the Department of State with elections, and I encourage anyone who has questions to go to the state's website, michigan.gov/vote, or contact your own individual local township or city clerk for true facts about how elections work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, for your service and your leadership. I know the voters in Delta Township are very fortunate to have you as their clerk, and the entire state of Michigan has learned a great deal from you, as well as many clerks that you work alongside. So thank you for your work. I want to just close by saying and talking a little bit about what we all should expect this weekend. So overall, we expect early voting sites to run smoothly and offer a secure, convenient options for voters participating in the presidential primary. My team will be in constant communication with clerks in each jurisdiction and will be on the ground at early voting sites to ensure everyone has the support they need. I will also be visiting several early voting sites personally over this 9-day period and making sure voters know about this new opportunity to make their voice heard. To find the nearest early voting site, voters can visit michigan.gov/earlyvoting. And I encourage everyone to check their registration, find an absentee ballot drop box, or their election day polling place at michigan.gov/vote. Whatever option voters choose to cast their ballot, they know that Michigan's elections are safe, secure, and that the results will be counted accurately. In the spirit of Richard Austin, and with the hard work of our dedicated clerks and poll workers, I know we will meet this moment in history and make Michigan a place where the government works for the people and where every voice is heard. So I'm happy to take a few questions, and I'll just end by also, again, thanking the Austin family for joining us today for this celebration, and thanking all of you for being here as well. As many of you know, we stand ready to help all members of the media become full experts in early voting and all the ins and outs, because we know you'll be expected to know everything in service to the folks who look to you for information. And we stand ready to make sure you get that information, starting with training and a number of other things that we have planned. So appreciate your partnership in getting this information out as well. Happy to take a few questions.
Secretary, I have one back here.
Yeah.
In the last year or so, I think your office said that there were about 100,000 inactive voters on the voter rolls that you were planning on getting rid of. Has that happened yet?
So we take very seriously our responsibility to ensure the accuracy of our voter registration rolls, and we do everything in alignment with the federal protections under the National Voter Registration Act. So we're going to continue to do that work. Jonathan, I don't know if you, our election director, want to add anything to that about the work we've been doing to ensure the accuracy of our voter rolls. We do have a website at michigan.gov/vote that also details that work.
Yeah, I'll briefly add that if you do go to michigan.gov/vote, there is a link to the voter cancellation procedures that explains the processes that we use. There are specific requirements that we have to follow under state and federal law before certain inactive voters can be removed. So, as has been the case for many years, we do a large-scale removal of inactive voters who have not responded to a notice and have not voted for a period of 2 federal elections, but we have to for those elections to pass. So we did a large-scale removal at the beginning of 2023, and there'll be another one at the beginning of 2025. As of right now, there's over 500,000 voters who are in an inactive status and will be removed either after the 2024 November election or after the 2026 November election, depending on when they got the notice. So they're still eligible to vote because they may still live in Michigan, but after that period of time elapses is when they will be canceled.
Could I just ask a clarifying question? So the initial question was that there were 100,000, but I just heard you say there were 500. So how many inactive voters are there? Is it 500,000?
There's different categories of inactive voters. So some voters are inactive simply because they haven't voted for a long time. Those voters are not specifically flagged for removal, but there are other voters who are inactive because local clerk or the state of Michigan has received information that indicates that they may have changed residency. So that could be that they appear to have surrendered their Michigan driver's license in a different state. It could be because election mail was sent to them and returned as undeliverable, or it could be because they appear to have registered to vote in another state, information that we get through the ERIC program. But when we get that reliable information, there's a specific process that we have to follow under state and federal law where they first get a notice and an opportunity to respond and say, you know, perhaps cancel me, or perhaps, no, I actually still do live in Michigan and vote there. If they don't respond to that and then don't vote for 2 federal elections, at that point they can be canceled. So that 500,000 includes one sort of cohort of inactive voters who will be canceled after the 2024 election, and another cohort that will be canceled after the 2026 election. So that may be why those numbers are appearing differently, but you can see the exact breakdown in each category at michigan.gov/vote.
So is it then advisable somebody who has moved out of state or whatever, to alert their local clerk?
If you want your registration canceled immediately, that's the best thing to do. Otherwise, if the clerk or the state of Michigan has received information that you have moved, if you don't respond and you don't vote, eventually your registration will get canceled, but it will be after a few years.
Under federal law. And Mary wanted to add a few things as well from a local voter's perspective. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you. I just want to say I hear from a lot of parents every time that we mail something out about elections saying, my child was at college, still voted from home, but now they got a job last year and they're in California or they're wherever. And my response is they need to put in writing with a signature, and I don't care if they write it on a napkin, take a picture with their cell phone, and I give them my phone number and they can text it to me so we can print it. All I need is a signature saying that I have moved. And we've been able to get clarity on a number of our voters who were on Verify. We still, it's not uncommon, every jurisdiction, I have about 2,200 right now that are in that Verify category because of them moving, going to college in another state, transferring jobs and that. It's very common percentage in all of our municipalities to have that little cupful of voters that have gone into a Verify status.
Thanks, Mary.
Secretary
Cup
Benson,
full of voters, I like that phrase. Go ahead, yes.
Given that the law provides 3 different ways that county clerks can early in-person voting, it seems like this option is going to have different levels of accessibility throughout the state. Can you talk about the decision process elected officials are going through and how many locations?
Yeah, we left it up to clerks because a clerk in Houghton may have different needs than a clerk in Rochester Hills in terms of their resources and what their voters need. And so it's the clerks themselves who had, under law, an opportunity to choose one of 3 options and let us know. And then you can actually find out who chose what on our website. We've tried to ensure all of that information is available. Oakland County is countywide. Other municipalities, particularly larger ones, chose to go it independently. We found many, like in Mary's situation, municipalities partner with each other next door. And then within an early voting, we're not necessarily just talking about one site. These 3 options enable and dictate the coordination. But you could have, as you do, within one county, multiple sites. And within 2 partner jurisdictions, you could have an early voting site in both jurisdictions, but it's managed and staffed together. So it doesn't necessarily tie to the place or the location, it just talks more about the management. But it's themselves who chose the option that was most convenient for them, and the clerks themselves who were involved in those 3 options being put into the legislation.
Does funding play a significant role there?
Allocated the state funding and resources that we received to the local jurisdictions. It was related to how they chose to manage their early voting site because the needs would be different if one county was handling multiple jurisdictions or if one jurisdiction was going on its own. So we had a formula as well that we worked with clerks to develop, and most of that funding was disseminated last year and in the first quarter of this year.
I wanted to ask a little bit more about.
Just one, you had your hand up and then we'll go. Sorry. Yeah.
Secretary, there's a movement to try to get people to write uncommitted on some of their ballots during the election. Apparently, the organizers of this movement are telling people who already submitted an absentee ballot to go and spoil it and then put in uncommitted. Have you heard that this is causing issues for any clerks who anticipate it would kind of be a headache for them to spoil all of those and then give new ones, or?
Clerk in Dearborn in particular, George Duraney, who's been meeting with community members to make sure they understand what happens if both a voter wants to find. And we have a section on our website that actually goes through that as well. If something has been submitted ahead of time and a voter chooses to change their vote in a select period of time. So we know the clerk in Dearborn in particular, where you're seeing the highest number of this potential, is very much in connection, in talking to the citizens that might have these questions or choices to make. And so in talking with him, I most recently talked with him on Monday. I didn't see that it was an issue with him or that he's experiencing. I think that the important thing is to ensure voters know that the difference between choosing uncommitted or choosing to write in something other than a candidate's name in the space underneath the uncommitted option and the consequences of both committed and choosing write-in, which would create a spoiled ballot if folks did both of those things. And so our office has been trying to make sure that folks have all the tools and resources they need to express their views in the way that they feel and their voice in their vote, but to do so in a way that won't unnecessarily result in a spoiled ballot, whether it be through an undervote, an overvote, or some other type of misunderstanding of the rules around voting.
Regular voter figure out where their voting, early voting is. In other words, they have to go and ask the clerk, or what do you do?
A number of things. We're actually mailing out information to every voter that says this is where your early voting site is. If you go to michigan.gov/vote or michigan.gov/earlyvoting, you can enter in your information and get the whole list of early voting sites. And in addition to that, folks can just call their clerk's office as well and get that information. Mary, did you have anything?
Yep, and a lot of clerks are using social media and our webpage. Both of those, we're doing blasts to let voters know that Saturday is the day. So we'll start tomorrow and we'll run them 2 or 3 times during the week.
I wanted to ask in particular more about the reception in rural places. Marquette was able to do a pilot in the fall, so I wanted to ask if it's been received in rural areas.
I think we're seeing 2 things. One, this is new for a lot of citizens and for a lot of clerks, and so there's an understanding of questions, uncertainty, and anxiety going into this. It's why it's why we did the pilot in the fall. It's also where we invited neighboring clerks to observe in different scenarios. It's why we worked with clerks to ensure people had options and funding, and it's also why we are grateful that a presidential primary that has a ratio of a turnout ratio that's a little bit less than when we'll be seeing in November gives us an opportunity as well to work with clerks and continue to ease into this new process. So that said, the main question and concern I heard, and Mary, I'd be interested in your thoughts as well, from rural voters, particularly in the Upper Peninsula, but throughout northern Michigan as well, were the same questions every clerk had about the new technology and really just making sure you had enough staff and places where people could vote early, and support from the state on all fronts. But in addition to that, I think in part because citizens in every county voted for this initiative, there's a great deal of education already in the field from on both ends that has made this smoother than I think it would have been had it been enacted whole cloth by the legislature. Did you have anything?
I would just add that all clerks have made a significant effort to make sure that their voters understand options and there is a great variety. Clerks spend a lot of time analyzing what is best for their community, and so there isn't one answer because communities are different, and so I hope people respect that every community could be different in how they approach it, but works for their community.
And to just put a pin in that and underscore something, one of the things I've seen in talking with our clerks in rural areas is not just how important the funding from the legislature was, as well as the flexibility that they were given in the laws has really been key. But in addition to that, the fact that there are many days, 9 days, gives clerks an opportunity to say to a voter, if you can't get to this early voting site on a Monday, maybe you can get there on a Saturday or next Saturday. There are so many options now that this is an added value across the board, and with funding and flexibility in place to make sure it's not much of a burden for our clerks. It's all signs point to this being successful as well as welcomed by clerks throughout the state. Yes.
Secretary Benson, kind of going off of that last question regarding the challenges that were identified within the pilot, what were some of those challenges, and what was, if so, if anything, was anything changed to kind of create a smooth sailing for the implementation statewide?
I think some of some of the things that we saw from clerks is the newness of it all led to, I think, questions leading up to the first day of the pilot as to how the early voting tool would work, what the technology would be, and how much time they'd have to familiarize themselves with it. As the early voting tool has been launched and has been ready for our clerks, and they've gone through various training models, we found once we get through the education piece and clerks feel comfortable that they know, because our clerks are experts, and when new things come in, they want to keep being experts. And anytime there's perhaps something unknown or something new, I think there's an understandable level of wanting to fix that and build that knowledge and get the training that you need from the state in order to do that. So that's what we saw most from the early voting pilot, how important it is for clerks to feel confident and comfortable going into the election, that the technology is going the technology in the early voting tools themselves worked very well. And the clerks themselves in the places I visited were incredibly prepared and over-prepared in many cases. The election workers as well were excited to be a part of it. So we saw across the board a smooth election. What we saw what was most important that we've worked and what this primary gives us an opportunity to do is to make sure clerks know as much as they feel they need to know to be comfortable going into this new system so that they can in turn deliver smooth elections to the voters in their communities.
We have time for one more question.
Okay.
Secretary Benson, obviously there are a certain amount of people each year prior to this one who might vote by mail because election day is untenable for them for whatever reason. Do you anticipate that the rollout of early voting will have an impact on how many people request absentee ballots in the future? Haven't already?
Well, it's interesting. We've seen more people request absentee ballots in this presidential primary, significantly more than did last year, or I'm sorry, the last presidential primary in 2020 at the same time. So what that tells us, and of course that was technically pre-COVID in March of 2020, but what that does tell us is that absentee voting and voting by mail continues to be enormously popular in our state. And with the advent or the addition of the permanent absentee ballot list across the state, we anticipate more citizens, not less, will be taking advantage of that option. They will have the choice if they want to return their ballot at an early voting site. They will have the choice if they want to just get their ballot and return it all in one spot at an early voting site to do that. It's an additional option. I think we may see without any data to go on, and this primary will give us some data, I would predict we could see more of a drop in election day turnout, with folks who choose to vote in person wanting to take perhaps one of those other days and vote in person. But I think we'll still consistently see a significant number of choosing to vote by mail. Are you seeing anything different? Or? Yeah.
I would agree. The biggest change in impact for Election Day actually occurred after the 2018 constitutional amendment that made no reason AV. And I'll just use Delta for an example. I went from 55, I have 27,500 registered voters. I went from 5,500 on a permanent AV application list to 13,500. So that was a very strong message. People want options in how they vote. Lives are different. They're busy. They need something other than Election Day for many people. And so we continue to give opportunities because we all want, as clerk, Secretary Benson, Director Brader, we all want people to vote. It's the basis of our democracy is having people vote. And so giving them options that get more people exercising that and getting engaged is critical, and we're doing it.
Thanks, Mary. Thank you all. And if I could just end by saying one quick thing on that as we all this primary, and on that note, the voter decisions and options that are both available and will be decided by voters over the next couple of weeks will give us a lot of information to go on for what to see in August as well as in November. And we did see in 2020 with the rollout of no reason absentee voting, the data points that we used to be fully prepared in November began being constructed in the primary. So we're going to be looking at it and encourage you all to look at it from that lens as well, because voters will start telling us in this election how they're going to exercise their choices. And I expect those ratios of choices will hold through November. So thanks. Thank you. Thanks, Mary.